The rate of unemployment has decreased slightly. We are down to 31.9% in the third quarter of the year. Almost 16.8 million South Africans now have jobs. That's only a 0.7% increase. The government has been warning that economic recovery will be slow, and economists have remarked on the sluggish rate of the growth. So what does this 0.7% increase actually mean in practice? Let's get some reaction and analysis now with project lead at Youth Capital, Crystal Duncan-Williams. Crystal, good afternoon. Welcome to today. First up, your overall reaction to the latest labour numbers.
Good afternoon, Dan. I think for us at Youth Capital, if we look at young people specifically, they have and they continue to bear the brunt of the unemployment crisis. This latest statistics presentation takes us through the last 10 years and the trends there. And if you compare those aged 15 to 34 with their counterparts aged 35 to 64, we see that consistently over the last decade, the youth unemployment rate has been 20% higher than that of the older labor force. And so, any sort of slight increase is really something we need to look at cautiously, because it is our experience with analyzing the data that even when jobs are created, the number of jobs created are actually so small in relation to the unemployment numbers that young people are last in the queue. So they do not benefit from those jobs that are created, even when we celebrate these small wins.
Yeah, very small. 8.9 million young people between the ages of 15 and 34, as you're referring to there, remain unemployed in our country, according to the late stats. And 9.1 million young people are the so-called NEET, not in education, employment, or training. It's really a huge number. You take those two numbers together, you are sitting at 18 million young people with nothing.
Yeah, and I think what we really need to think about there is that all of the young people that are unemployed, 8 in 10 of them have never had work. And we know that people of all ages continue to be chronically unemployed, what we call long-term unemployed, looking for work for more than a year. And the longer you stay out of work, the less likely you are to find work. And for young people who have never had a work experience, the barrier to entry into the labor market becomes even greater. We really need to seriously think innovatively and differently about how we stimulate the economy and grow the economy, because what we are doing is clearly not working and nowhere near the rates that we needed to tackle this crisis.
Even the fact that we've surpassed pre-COVID levels with these numbers?
Yeah, so I think, we're celebrating, we passed the pre-COVID levels, but if you actually delve into the absorption rate, so number of people that are absorbed into the labor market over the number of people in the labor force, the absorption rate is not at pre-COVID levels. And so, if I can just ask you to imagine a swimming pool, and the swimming pool is the entire labor force. You're adding lots of young people to the pool, and then a few of them are getting out of the pool on the other side to find a job, but, the majority are staying in unemployment. So the actual size of the labor force since COVID started has increased. We know from the latest census data that we have a huge youth population, even bigger than we were predicting before we did the census. And so that is really the group we need to be focusing in on. Pre-COVID, it was terrible. And so to celebrate that win is also something we should do, cautiously and a little bit pessimistically. But we really need to focus on, a basket of solutions for young people, looking at the entire journey, not, once-off programs that have a little bit of impact on them. Young people are back into obscurity when they end.
Yeah, so the job numbers, the pre-COVID level job numbers should not be our standard, because things were bad anyway by the time we got hit by COVID when it comes to youth unemployment. Crystal, can I ask you this? Are we focusing? There's so many efforts. You've got the Youth Employment Service campaign that the president launched, and we have. I interviewed Ravi Naidu the other day. He is the CEO of Yes. You've got so many others. You've got your Harambis of this world. You've got so many initiatives. Are we focusing on the wrong things? I just want to get a general sense from you at Youth Capital. Is the country focusing on wrong efforts? Because the world of work has changed because of digitalization, because of technology, and we have these big skills gaps that we are told about all the time. Should we shift our focus to something else? So people, it's not about getting jobs, but it's about enabling them to earn an income and maybe themselves creating opportunities for others to earn an income. What do you think?
Yeah, so at Youth Capital we've got the action plan, which looks at 10 points, and within each of those 10 points, there are really multiple layers to the point. And the reason it's so complicated, there's no one silver bullet. Some young people might be great being entrepreneurs or creating work for themselves. Other young people just they don't want to do that. They want to work for an employer. Some young people are really they tech savvy, even if they've never had any experience. You speak to these programs that do basic coding, and some young people thrive and others drop out within the first week because it's not for them. And so I think we need to understand that we need a multitude of programs, but where I think we're getting it wrong in the youth development sector is the coordination between those programs historically has not been great. Now I think that's starting to improve, and when we look at things like the Basic Education Employment Initiative, where you see DBE working with the presidency, cross-departmental collaboration is actually where we need to start. If the government models that coordination in the youth development sector a bit better, it makes it easier for civil society and the private sector to do the same. And so instead of creating duplicate programs where we pump a whole lot of money into skills training or a whole lot of money into internships or whatever it is, we need a little bit of everything. And we need the little bit of everything to add up to a greater than the sum of its parts. And I think that's where we need to focus on.
Yeah.
Both at a government level, holding them accountable, and for civil society.
Yeah, one thing I like, what you've just in your answer, is the fact you bring in the word collaboration and all these various efforts. If you collaborate, then you are more likely to have impact than if you work in silos and not collaborate. So as we conclude, Crystal, at the back of these numbers, they are being presented with a slight improvement in terms of a slight decrease, being down to 31.9% in the third quarter of the year. Those are the unemployment figures. What will be the bigger message, a bigger interpretation for us going forward as a country to take out of these numbers?
I think, certainly for us at Youth Capital, what we would call on others to do is to continue to ask hard questions, to say to government, and particularly National Treasury in this case, how are we spending our money to create the GDP growth that we need? We are clearly, this approach that we're taking is not working. And as we think up in the lead up to SONA next year and elections, I think it's going to be a watershed moment for South Africa. Are we asking the right questions? This youth unemployment is the product of systemic challenges. Focusing on young people alone won't get us won't get young people into jobs. We need to think about the system in which they operate, and we need to create an economy that is growing at a rate that will absorb all of these young people. And so it's complicated, but we need to hold all of these truths in our mind as we, head up to SONA, as we cast our vote. Are we holding government accountable across these different spheres?
Yeah, so international, very little to celebrate in these numbers.
Basically.
Thank you very much. That's Crystal Duncan-Williams from Youth Capital, just giving us some reaction and some insights about the rate of unemployment in the country, which, according to Stats SA, in the latest labor force bulletins, unemployment bulletin has gone down slightly, down to 31.9%.